When my son Samuel and his wife died in an accident, I thought I'd lost everything. Then their lawyer handed me a set of keys and said, "Samuel left this for you." I drove to the address, following his directions, my heart heavy, hoping for one last gift from my boy. But when I opened that door and stepped inside, what I found revealed an earth-shattering secret my son had been hiding all this time. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching this story unfold and what time it is where you are. At 67, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. The phone call that shattered my world came at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my kitchen in Denver, nursing my second cup of coffee and reading the sports section when the shrill ring cut through the quiet like a blade. "Mr. Crawford, this is Officer Williams with the Colorado State Patrol." The voice was professional but gentle, the kind they train officers to use when delivering life-changing news. "I'm calling about your son, Samuel Crawford." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Samuel was supposed to be on a skiing weekend in Vail with his wife Ophelia. They'd left Friday afternoon excited about hitting the fresh powder. "There's been an accident, sir." The words that followed hit me like an avalanche. Vehicle went off Highway 6 near Vail Pass. Icy conditions. Car tumbled 300 feet down a rocky embankment. Samuel Crawford, 34, pronounced dead at the scene. His wife Ophelia Cross Crawford, 29, presumed dead. Her body swept away by the rushing creek below. I don't remember much about the next few hours. Neighbors appeared. Mrs. Henderson from next door, the Johnsons from across the street. Someone made phone calls. Someone else brought casseroles. The house filled with hushed tones and awkward embraces that death brings to the living. The funeral was small. Samuel had never been one for a large social circle, preferring his computers and quiet evenings at home. Ophelia's family flew in from back east, distant relatives who barely knew my son. We held a joint service even though they never found her body. I sat in the front pew of Riverside Methodist, the church where my late wife Margaret and I had raised Samuel, and felt utterly alone. As the last mourners filed out into the crisp October afternoon, a man in an expensive charcoal suit approached me. He was younger than me, maybe 55, with the confident bearing that comes from years of handling important affairs. "Mr. Crawford, I'm Michael Harrison, your son's attorney." He extended a manicured hand. "I'm very sorry for your loss." I stared at him confused. Samuel never mentioned having an attorney. Harrison's expression was carefully neutral. "There are some matters regarding your son's estate. Perhaps we could speak privately." We walked to a quiet corner of the church lobby. Harrison reached into his briefcase and withdrew a set of keys. Old-fashioned brass keys on a simple ring. "Samuel came to see me 6 months ago," Harrison said quietly. "He made very specific arrangements. These are for a property in Golden, Colorado." He pressed the keys into my palm. "He wanted you to have it." I looked down at the keys, their weight somehow heavier than expected. "What property?" Samuel never said anything about buying property. "A house," Harrison said. "He purchased it specifically for you, Mr. Crawford. Left detailed instructions that you were to receive it immediately upon his death." He handed me a piece of paper with an address written in Samuel's careful handwriting. He was quite insistent about that. My hands were shaking now. Samuel had always been thoughtful, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Why didn't he tell me? Harrison's eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Sympathy, perhaps, or something deeper. "I think he wanted it to be a surprise, sir. A gift." He paused, studying my face. "Samuel left something important for you there. You need to see it yourself, Mr. Crawford." The October wind picked up outside, rattling the church windows. I stood there holding those brass keys, feeling like I was holding pieces of my son's heart, wondering what other secrets Samuel had kept from his old man. The mountain road stretched ahead as I drove toward Golden. 3 days later, Samuel's brass keys clicking softly in my jacket pocket. My son had always been full of surprises, but buying a house without telling me, that was something else entirely. Golden appeared nestled against the Rocky Mountain foothills like a postcard. I followed GPS through winding streets until I reached Samuel's address. When I saw the house, I had to pull over and catch my breath. It was beautiful. A sprawling ranch-style home with large windows and stone accents, positioned perfectly to capture the sweeping mountain view. This was easily $1.2 million property. How had Samuel afforded this on a software engineer's salary? The front door opened smoothly, and I stepped into what felt like a dream. Everything was immaculate. Samuel had spent months getting every detail right. The living room featured a stone fireplace, leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the mountains like a painting. On the mantelpiece sat a framed photo. I recognized the three of us at last Christmas: Samuel, me, and Margaret. Seeing it there in this house I'd never known existed hit me harder than expected. My son had been thinking of family, of legacy, of home. I wandered through rooms slowly. The kitchen was modern but warm. The home office was set up perfectly. Comfortable reading chair, built-in bookshelves, even a small wet bar. Samuel had thought of everything. But the master bedroom stopped me cold. There, placed on the pillow like a hotel mint, was an envelope marked "Dad" in Samuel's familiar script. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Dad, if you're reading this, you've found my surprise. I know buying a house without telling you seems crazy, but I wanted something special for your retirement. Somewhere peaceful where you can write that novel you always talked about. Mom always said you needed a place in the mountains. There's something else, though. Something important I need to share, but not in a letter. In the master closet behind the back wall, there's a hidden safe. The combination is Mom's birthday. Month, day, year. Inside, you'll find everything I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I love you, Dad. I hope you understand why I had to do things this way. Samuel." I stood there holding the letter, feeling the weight of my son's love and the mystery he'd left behind. Then I walked to the walk-in closet and examined the back wall. Behind a panel that looked like solid wood, I found the outline of a safe door. My fingers shook as I entered Margaret's birthday, 03/17/1952. The safe clicked open with a soft whisper. Inside were items that made my heart race: a USB drive, several thick manila folders, and a note clipped to the top that read, "Watch this first, Dad. Everything will make sense." The laptop hummed to life on the oak desk, its screen casting a blue glow across the home office. I settled into the leather chair and inserted the USB drive with trembling fingers. The video player opened automatically, and suddenly my son's face filled the screen. He was sitting in this very room, the mountain view visible behind him. Samuel looked thinner than I remembered, his cheeks slightly hollow, though his smile was as warm as ever. "Dad," he began, his voice carrying that familiar mix of affection and nervousness. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. But I wanted to leave you something special." I leaned forward, drinking in every detail of his face. This was my son alive again, speaking directly to me. "I know you're probably confused about this house," Samuel continued, wondering how I could afford it, why I never mentioned it. "The truth is, I've been planning this for over a year, Dad. Ever since you started talking about retirement." He paused, running his hand through his hair, a childhood gesture whenever he was explaining something important. "You remember how Mom always said you needed a place in the mountains? Somewhere quiet where you could finally write that novel?" Samuel's smile grew wider. "She used to tell me your father has stories in him, Samuel. He just needs the right place to let them out." My throat tightened. Margaret had said exactly that many times. "So I started saving," Samuel said. "Every bonus, every tax refund, every penny I could spare. I wanted to give you something that would honor Mom's memory and give you the space you deserve. This house isn't just a gift, Dad. It's a promise that her dreams for you don't have to die with her." I found myself reaching toward the screen, wanting to touch my son's face. "I picked this spot because you can see the sunrise over the Rockies from the bedroom window," he continued. "There's a trail that leads right into the foothills. Perfect for those morning walks you love. I even had them install that wet bar you always joked about wanting." Samuel leaned closer to the camera. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about this while I was alive, Dad. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to see your face when you walked through that front door." He sat back, looking at me through the screen with eyes so much like Margaret's. "I love you, Dad, more than I ever found words to say. You taught me everything about being a man, about honor, about taking care of the people you love. I hope this house shows you how much that meant to me." But then Samuel's expression changed. The warmth remained, but something else crept in, a seriousness that seemed to settle on his shoulders. "Dad," he said, his voice dropping lower, more urgent, "I need to tell you something important, something I couldn't say while I was alive." Samuel took a deep breath on the screen, and I could see him gathering courage for what came next. The afternoon light streaming through the office window seemed to dim as he spoke. "I'm sick, Dad. Brain tumor stage 4. The doctors gave me 4 to 6 months." The words shattered something inside me. I doubled over in the chair as if I'd been punched, a strangled cry escaping my throat. My son, my only child, had been dying, and I hadn't known. The USB drive blurred through my tears as grief crashed over me like a tidal wave. I found out 6 months ago. Samuel continued, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. Started with headaches I couldn't shake, then vision problems. By the time I went to the doctor, it was already too advanced for surgery. I stared at the screen, my mind racing back through our recent conversations. Had there been signs? Had I been too caught up in my own retirement plans to notice my son was fighting for his life? I made a decision that day, Dad. I wasn't going to tell you. Samuel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You went through hell watching Mom fade away. The chemo, the hospital visits, the hope that kept getting crushed. I couldn't put you through that again. Margaret's final months flashed through my memory. The sterile hospital rooms, the machines, the way hope had slowly drained from her eyes. Samuel had been there for all of it, holding my hand as much as hers. I didn't want you to spend what time we had left looking at me like I was already gone, he said. I wanted those last months to be about living, not dying. Now I understood the distance I'd felt lately. The canceled dinners, the shorter phone calls, the way he'd seemed distracted at Christmas. He hadn't been pulling away. He'd been protecting me. So I started planning, Samuel said. I liquidated my stock portfolio, cashed in my retirement accounts, took out a second mortgage. Every penny went into making sure you'd be taken care of after I was gone. $5.5 million. The number felt surreal. Samuel had sacrificed everything to ensure I'd be comfortable. The house was just the beginning, Dad. I've set up trusts, paid off your mortgage, established accounts you don't even know about yet. Harrison has all the paperwork. You'll never have to worry about money again. I was crying now, watching my son explain how he'd spent his final months not fighting his disease, but fighting to secure my future. The selflessness of it was so typically Samuel. I know you're angry with me for not telling you, he said as if he could see me through the camera. But Dad, you did help. Every day of my life you showed me what it meant to be strong, to put family first, to handle hard things with dignity. Samuel paused, wiping his eyes. Everything is yours now, Dad. The house, the money, all of it. I hope it gives you the freedom to write, to travel, to do all the things you and Mom used to dream about. But then his expression shifted, becoming more serious, almost troubled. There's one more thing, Dad. Something I discovered before I died. Something that changes everything. Samuel's face on the screen grew more serious, and he gestured towards something off camera. I left something else in the safe for you, Dad. Look at those documents, the folders marked Stephen's investigation. Still reeling from the cancer revelation, I turned to the manila folders with shaking hands. The first folder was thick, labeled Stephen's investigation in Samuel's neat handwriting. I opened it not knowing what to expect. The first photograph hit me like a slap. Ophelia, my daughter-in-law, sitting across from a man I didn't recognize at what looked like an upscale restaurant. They were holding hands across the table, leaning toward each other with the intimate body language of lovers, not friends. Private investigator Carol Stevens took those photos. Samuel's voice continued from the laptop. I hired her 2 months ago when I started noticing things. I flipped through more pictures, each one more damning than the last. Ophelia and this stranger entering a hotel together, kissing in a parking garage, walking hand in hand through what looked like a park in downtown Denver. His name is Derek Morgan. Samuel said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Insurance broker at Denver Financial. They'd been having an affair for 8 months. 8 months. I stared at the photos, remembering family dinners, where Ophelia had seemed so devoted to Samuel, so concerned about his health, so perfect in her role as the loving wife. She'd fooled us all. I know what you're thinking, Dad, that maybe it was just a fling, that maybe she was scared about my diagnosis and needed someone to lean on. Samuel's voice grew harder. But there's more. Check the insurance documents. I set the photographs aside and opened the second folder. Inside were copies of insurance policies, 3 of them all bearing Samuel's name and what looked like his signature. The first policy was for $500,000 with Ophelia listed as the primary beneficiary. The second was for $300,000 with Derek Morgan listed as beneficiary under the designation business partner. The third was for $200,000 payable to something called Sterling Investment Trust, with Derek Morgan as the trustee. $1 million total. I studied Samuel's signatures on each document, but something felt wrong about them. The handwriting was close but not quite right. The S in Samuel was too flourished, the C in Crawford too angular. They forged my signature, Dad, Samuel confirmed as if reading my thoughts. I never signed those policies, never even knew they existed until Carol's investigation uncovered them. My hands were trembling as the implications sank in. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to profit from my son's death. Derek Morgan has been in the insurance business for 15 years, Samuel continued. He knows exactly how these policies work, what questions get asked, what documentation is required, and he had access to all my personal information through Ophelia. I looked back at the photographs with new eyes. This wasn't a woman seeking comfort during a difficult time. This was a predator who had targeted my dying son. I confronted Ophelia about the affair 3 weeks ago, Samuel said, his voice heavy with pain. She denied it at first, then broke down and said she was sorry that she was scared about losing me and had made a mistake. She begged me not to tell you, said it would destroy the family. The family? What family? The one built on lies and betrayal. But she never mentioned the insurance policies, Dad. Never said a word about the money. When I showed her the documents, she went completely white. Started talking about how Derek had pressured her, how she'd never meant for things to go so far. I closed the folder, my mind racing. $1 million was a fortune to most people, but it was also a motive for something far worse than adultery. Samuel leaned closer to the camera, his expression grave. Dad, I recorded something. You need to hear this. My hands fumbled through the safe until I found a small digital recording device. Samuel's voice from the laptop guided me. There's a voice recorder in there, Dad. Press play. This conversation happened 2 weeks before the skiing trip. I pressed the button with trembling fingers. Static filled the room, then I heard voices. Ophelia's voice clear as day, and Derek Morgan's. We can't wait much longer, Ophelia was saying, her tone cold and calculating. The doctors said he could linger for months. I know, baby. But we have to be smart about this, Derek replied. The skiing trip could be our opportunity. My blood turned to ice. Something in their tone made my skin crawl. Are you sure about this? Ophelia asked. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. Mountain roads are dangerous. Accidents happen all the time, especially in winter conditions. And afterward we disappear for a while. Let things settle down. Then we collect what's ours and start our new life. The casual way they discussed it made me sick. They were talking about my son like he was an obstacle to remove. The insurance policies are all in place, Ophelia asked. All 3 of them. 1 million total. More than enough for us to disappear somewhere warm and tropical. Samuel's voice from the laptop broke through my horror, and his next words explained everything. I knew what they were planning, Dad, and I made a choice. His voice was steady, resolved. I had maybe 2 months left, 3 at most. The cancer was spreading faster than the doctors expected. I was going to die anyway. I stared at the screen, beginning to understand the terrible logic of what my son had done. But if I died naturally, they would have gotten away with it, Samuel continued. The insurance money, the fake grief, the perfect crime. And worse, they might have come after you next. You have money, Dad. You have assets they could want. My hands gripped the chair arms as the full picture became clear, so I decided to let them try Dad. I went on that skiing trip knowing what they planned to do. I wore a wire-hid cameras in the car, documented everything. I turned myself into bait so I could catch them. The sacrifice my son had made hit me like a physical blow. He had walked knowingly into a trap to protect me. I thought maybe I could survive it, expose them, and spend my last weeks watching them go to prison. Samuel's voice cracked slightly. But I also knew the odds. Either way, you'd be safe. Either way, justice would be served. I found the additional evidence he'd mentioned. Bank statements showing Derek's recent large deposits. Travel documents for Costa Rica. Most damning of all, a second recording device. This one from the car. I hid that recorder in the dashboard, Dad. It captured everything that happened on the mountain that night. How they drugged me. How Ophelia faked her own death. How they staged the whole thing. Samuel looked directly into the camera, his eyes filled with a father's love and a dying man's determination. I couldn't let them hurt you, Dad. I couldn't let them win. Take this evidence to the FBI. Make sure my sacrifice meant something. The phone was in my hands before Samuel's video had even finished. My fingers shook as I scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I hadn't called in 3 years. Ryan Foster had been my partner at the Bureau for 8 years before I retired. If anyone would believe this story, it would be him. Foster, his familiar voice answered on the second ring. Ryan, it's Patrick Crawford. I need to report a murder. A pause. Patrick, Jesus, it's been forever. What's going on? My son's murder, and his wife is still alive. The words came out steady, controlled, despite the rage burning in my chest. Whoa, slow down. Patrick, I heard about Samuel's accident. I'm sorry for your loss, but it wasn't an accident, Ryan. They killed him. Ophelia and her boyfriend killed my son for insurance money, then faked her death to cover it up. Another pause, longer this time. Patrick, you're grieving. Sometimes our minds... I have evidence. Recordings, photographs, forged documents, offshore bank accounts. Everything. I was already moving toward the door, grabbing my keys with my free hand. Can you meet me at the Denver field office right now? Right now, Patrick. It's almost 6 o'clock on a... My son died to get this evidence, Ryan. He let them kill him so he could expose them and protect me. Don't tell me about office hours. The steel in my voice must have convinced him. All right, I'll meet you there in an hour. But Patrick, if this is just grief talking, it's not. I was already in my car, the manila folders and recording devices on the passenger seat. 1 hour. The drive to the federal building felt like the longest hour of my life. Every red light, every slow driver ahead of me felt like an obstacle between my son's murderers and justice. By the time I reached downtown Denver, the autumn sun was setting behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky the color of blood. Ryan was waiting for me in the lobby, looking older than I remembered, but still carrying himself with that FBI bearing that never quite goes away. He studied my face as I approached, and I could see him cataloging the details. The red eyes, the grim set of my jaw, the way I clutched the evidence folders like they contained my life. You look like hell, Patrick, he said quietly. I feel worse. I handed him the first folder. But I'm not crazy and I'm not imagining things. Look at this. We rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. Ryan's office was exactly what I'd expected. Government issue furniture case files, stacked everywhere a photo of his family on the desk. He cleared a space and gestured for me to sit. Start from the beginning, he said, pulling out a legal pad. I told him everything. The house in Golden Samuel's video confession about the cancer, the private investigator's photos, the forged insurance policies. When I played the recording of Ophelia and Derek's conversation, Ryan's expression changed from skeptical to grim. This is premeditated murder, Patrick, he said when the recording ended. Federal crime given the insurance fraud across state lines. He spent the next 30 minutes examining every piece of evidence, making phone calls to verify details. Derek Morgan's criminal background check came back with 2 prior fraud convictions. The insurance companies confirmed the policies were active, and the signatures looked suspicious under initial review. I need to ask you something, Ryan said finally. Are you prepared for what comes next? If Ophelia is alive, if she's been living under a false identity, this investigation could take months. It could get dangerous. I thought of Samuel's face on that video, the courage it had taken for him to walk into that trap, knowing he might not survive. My son gave his life to get this evidence. I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Ryan nodded and reached for his phone. I'm calling the Financial Crimes Unit. We'll start tracing these offshore accounts, track any movement of funds. If they're alive and spending money, we'll find the trail. He looked at me with the same intensity I remembered from our days chasing down leads together. Patrick, if they're alive, we'll find them. This investigation starts tonight. 10 months passed like a slow-burning fuse. 10 months of waiting, of sleepless nights, of checking my phone every few hours, hoping for news from Ryan. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had worked methodically tracing the offshore accounts through a maze of shell companies and fake identities that stretched across 3 countries. I tried to return to some semblance of normal life, spending time at the Golden House Samuel had left me attempting to write in the home office where I'd first learned the truth. But every morning I woke up thinking about Ophelia and Derek living freely somewhere while my son lay in Riverside Cemetery. Then on a hot August morning, my phone rang. Patrick, we got them. Ryan's voice was tired but triumphant. Both suspects in custody. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Where? Costa Rica, just like your son's evidence suggested. Derek was living in a beachfront condo in Manuel Antonio under the name David Martinez. Ophelia was at a resort in Tamarindo calling herself Elena Rodriguez. They weren't even together anymore. Apparently they'd had a falling out over the money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Greed had brought them together, and greed had torn them apart. They're alive, I said, still hardly believing it. Samuel was right. He was right about everything, Patrick. The Costa Rican authorities are cooperating fully. Both suspects will be extradited within 60 days. 2 months later, I sat in the front row of a Denver federal courthouse, watching as Ophelia Cross Crawford and Derek Morgan were led into the courtroom in shackles. Ophelia looked different. Her hair was shorter and darker, her face tanned from months in the tropical sun, but her eyes were the same cold blue I remembered from family dinners. She didn't look at me once during the entire proceedings. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on the second day, walking the jury through Samuel's evidence, playing the recordings that had started this whole investigation. When I finished, I could see several jurors wiping their eyes. Ophelia's defense strategy was predictable and desperate. Samuel Crawford was dying of brain cancer, her lawyer argued. The tumor affected his judgment, made him paranoid and delusional. These recordings are the fantasies of a sick man. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged insurance policies, the offshore bank accounts, the fake identities, the rental agreements in Costa Rica. Most damning of all, the recording from Samuel's car that captured their voices on the night he died. Derek tried to save himself by throwing Ophelia under the bus. "She planned everything," he testified, his voice shaking. "She said her husband was going to die anyway, that we deserved the money more than some old man who'd lived his life. I just followed her lead." Ophelia's mask finally slipped during his testimony. "You coward," she hissed loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. "You were the one who said we had to speed things up." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On the charge of first-degree murder, the foreman read, "We find the defendant, Ophelia Cross Crawford, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, Derek Morgan, guilty." The judge's sentencing was swift and merciless. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for Ophelia. 25 years for Derek. As the bailiffs led them away, I finally caught Ophelia's eye. For just a moment, the cold mask dropped, and I saw something that might have been fear or regret or maybe just anger at being caught. I stood up slowly, feeling older than my 67 years, but lighter than I'd felt in months. "Samuel's justice has been served," I whispered to the empty courtroom. Outside, Ryan was waiting for me on the courthouse steps, squinting in the bright Colorado sunshine. "How does it feel?" he asked. I thought about my son, about his courage in those final weeks, about the sacrifice he'd made to protect me and ensure these two would face consequences for their crimes. "It feels like I can finally breathe again." The mountain sunrise painted the golden house in shades of amber and rose as I sat in Samuel's home office 1 year after the trial ended. The same chair, the same desk, the same view of the Rockies that my son had loved so much. But everything felt different now. The weight of grief had shifted into something else. Not lighter exactly, but purposeful. I thought about Samuel's final video message, his words about wanting to give me freedom to write and travel, to do all the things Mom and I used to dream about. But sitting there in the morning light, I finally understood what Samuel had really given me wasn't just money or a house. He'd given me the power to make his sacrifice mean something. I reached for my phone, dialing the number I'd memorized weeks ago. University of Colorado Cancer Center. Dr. Bennett speaking. "Doctor, this is Patrick Crawford. I'm ready to move forward with the Samuel Crawford Foundation." 3 hours later, I sat in Dr. Lisa Bennett's office signing papers that would change everything. $4 million, nearly 3/4 of Samuel's legacy, would fund brain cancer research for the next decade. This level of funding will allow us to pursue treatment protocols we've only dreamed about, Dr. Bennett said. Immunotherapy, targeted gene therapy, personalized medicine approaches. "My son believed in fighting for what seemed impossible," I said. "He proved that one person's determination could change everything." The Samuel Crawford Brain Cancer Research Laboratory was dedicated 6 months later. I stood in the gleaming facility surrounded by young researchers whose passion reminded me of Samuel at their age. "We're already seeing promising results in our first trial," Dr. Bennett explained. 15 patients, 7 showing significant tumor reduction. "The protocol your son's foundation made possible is giving people hope." Hope. That word Samuel had lived by. On the lab wall hung a photograph of Samuel from his college graduation, grinning at the camera, his whole life ahead of him. Below was a simple plaque, "In memory of Samuel Crawford, who believed that love is the most powerful force in the universe." I kept the golden house and $1.5 million, more than enough for retirement. But every morning when I woke up in Samuel's gift to me, I thought about the researchers working in his laboratory, the families receiving news that treatment options existed, the children who might grow up because my son had chosen courage over comfort. The novel I'd always talked about writing remained unwritten. Instead, I found myself volunteering at the cancer center, talking to families facing impossible choices. I couldn't give them easy answers, but I could give them what Samuel had given me, the knowledge that love endures, that sacrifice has meaning, that even in darkness, hope survives. Sometimes late at night in the home office, I'd think about Samuel's courage in those final weeks, how he'd walked into danger to protect me, to ensure justice would be served. "You did it, son," I'd whisper to the empty room. "You turned tragedy into triumph." The foundation continues its work today. Young researchers pursue breakthrough treatments. Families find hope where none existed before. And somewhere I believe Samuel knows that his sacrifice created something beautiful from something terrible. Looking back on this journey, I realize how blind I was to the warning signs. Don't be like me. Don't let your love for family cloud your judgment when something feels wrong. If I had paid closer attention to Samuel's weight loss, his canceled dinners, his distant behavior, maybe I could have helped him sooner. But God works in mysterious ways, and even in our darkest moments, He has a plan. The truth is, we never really know the people closest to us. Ophelia lived in my home, called me Dad, shared our family meals, all while planning my son's murder. It's a reminder that evil can wear the most beautiful masks. But as these grandpa stories teach us, love and justice will always triumph in the end. Samuel's courage in those final weeks showed me what real faith looks like. He trusted that God would guide me to the truth, even after he was gone. That's the kind of true story that restores your belief in divine providence. My son didn't just leave me money. He left me a mission to turn tragedy into hope. To other fathers and grandfathers sharing their grandpa stories, remember this: our children are watching how we handle life's hardest moments. They learn courage not from our words, but from our actions when everything falls apart. This true story taught me that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our family is the strength to seek justice, no matter how painful the truth might be. The Samuel Crawford Foundation continues saving lives today because one young man chose sacrifice over surrender. God used my son's death to create something beautiful. Breakthrough treatments that give families hope where none existed before. That's how the Lord transforms our deepest pain into our greatest purpose. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, know that you're not alone. These true story moments test our faith, but they also reveal our strength. What would you do if you discovered such betrayal in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring grandpa stories that prove love conquers all. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful testimonies of faith, justice, and redemption.